Gio! Hello there!
Good to see you.
Are you frustrated with being at home, or are there some benefits to working from home?
I am happy to be at home, but I'm very worried about everything else. I'm not frustrated. I've been traveling more than a share that is allowed to a human being in the past 10 years. So I basically haven't been in the same country for more than a week for 10 years.
There's just so much going on which is really horrible outside at the moment, and I think this series is an opportunity for a slight sense of escape maybe within the imagination, not least because we're all essentially confined in our houses. I mean, I can see 3 of your 4 walls behind you. I think you can see a couple of mine. And the idea, as you know, is that we've both had a little think and come up with a couple of images each that we want to talk about from your sort of department, so Impressionism into modern art. And I think that we're going to kick off with one of your picks, right, Gio?
Indeed, yes. My first pick is probably one of my favorite works of art in the world. It's also one that I associate with possibly falling in love with wanting to be with art and wanting to be an art historian. It's Le Balcon by Manet.
And just before we describe it, can I jump in, Gio? Because when we were emailing about this, obviously the brief was we were thinking about interiors, and this one hadn't even crossed my mind as something to do. I think this is a really inspired choice. It's very clever because, of course, it is sort of an interior, but the viewpoint is actually outside. And so we're seeing people who are inside looking out, and we, the viewer, are outside looking in. Maybe you could just describe the picture a little bit.
Yes, it's a very enigmatic picture, and it was incredibly subversive for the time. And you don't really understand what is going on. It's a mystery. Everybody has been trying to understand what are the connections between the people depicted. The figure that you see immediately, you're completely captivated by, is the woman. And it's the first apparition, the first formal apparition of Berthe Morisot, such an important model for Manet and an artist in her own right.
I think it feels like a great choice for now as well, because, I mean, you've talked about that frontal perspective of the painting, but one of the really distinctive features, which is part of that, is, of course, this green balustrade of the balcony, which is almost like this cage-like form, this sort of barrier between us and the people within the painting, which again, you can't help but look at it through the eyes of today and feel, if we're feeling at all slightly confined, I think there is that sense there. And actually, when you look closely, there's a 4th figure, isn't there?
Yes, which is even much more part of the mystery, and that's why this tension between inside and outside is incredibly strong. You really cannot even fathom what's going on inside.
I think part of the reason it also has this resonance is that, I mean, it has a theatrical sense, doesn't it? They could be in a theatrical box. They could be looking at some drama that's happening outside of the painting altogether. They're clearly absorbed in what's happening in the street. But notably, there isn't much of a connection between them at all. There's some sense, which I think speaks to us now in what we're going through, of that sense of, I don't know, the alienation of, what is that? That sort of modern identity, feeling isolated.
Yeah, and feeling melancholic and having more time for thinking and reading and for memories. Famously, which I think is very interesting for our conversation as well, the most important reaction was one of the caricatures that it got in the Charivari, where the very famous caricaturist Cham said, "Close the shutters." That was the why do you show us this very unusual and uninteresting conversation going on? Keep it indoors, which is, again, very much the point. We're revealing a lot of ourselves through Instagram, through social media, through what people can see from our windows. Our inhibitions are being lowered at the moment, I'm sure, and they will continue to change and to lower as we progress in seclusion, I guess. So it's interesting.
That's a beautifully made point, Gio, and I wonder whether at that moment we should close the shutters for now on that painting and think about the next one, because your pick got me thinking. It's also a French painting, And it's just a few years after The Balcony, painted by someone that Manet knew very well, Degas. And the painting I picked is called Woman at a Window. It may initially seem slightly downbeat, but I love the sort of slight restraint, the austerity, the economy of means, because this was a painting that dates from 1871. This is before the first Impressionist exhibition. And Degas already, I think he's got quite used to thinning down his oil paints with, is it with turpentine, with turps?
So the light effect is unbelievably vague and mysterious and misty. There is this almost inability to understand what's going on, like a fog. I love Degas. I adore Degas. Is a wonderful artist, but I always find it increasingly difficult to reconcile myself with his misogyny, probably, and his very complicated relationship with women. So it's interesting that you chose this image, because when he has a beautiful woman, he struggles to just portray her.
I completely take that point and agree with it totally. I suppose part of it for me was just thinking of the times that we're in now, and that ability that great art has to slightly shift in meaning and nuance depending on the moment, which couldn't have been conceived by the artist who created it for successive generations. There's just something about this that has a melancholy to it. It has a slight wistful quality, and it also has what I think lots of people are, I mean, I'm doing it right now, sitting by a window. There's not much that's going on outside at the moment, but slightly it has that dreamlike quality, and we're having to resort to our inner selves much more than perhaps we were used to until all of this happened. And somehow it just seemed resonant of that. Well, we're back with you, Gio. What have you picked as your second choice?
I have picked a work that, to me, is really the absolute. It's epitomizing the tensions and simmering dramas of being inside, closed inside, especially in a particular moment in time, which is the turn of the century Paris. And it's by Vuillard, and it's actually possibly one of his masterpieces. There is also a very nice Christie's aspect to it, in that we were able to secure it for auction and offer it, and it's the record price for the artist.
I mean, critics at the time spoke about how these, particularly Bonnard and Vuillard, they were known as the intimistes, right? They did these very intimate interior scenes, often featuring women that had this feel of that they'd been embroidered almost, as though there was a sense of textiles, that the surfaces were woven, not with paint. Almost.
Patterns, textiles, everything is so important. Wallpapers, that's why the inside becomes really very much the protagonist. Even the rooms where everything was taking place are charged with paintings over wallpapers, and in the attention to every fabric, not only what the women are wearing, but the textiles on the tables, the patterns of the cups they drink tea from, everything, as you say, is incredibly studied and mannered.
So we know who she is, but tell me who he is in the blue. And then there's actually, although you can barely see him, there's a third figure just poking in from the left.
Yes, exactly, and that's why I chose this picture as really the ménage à trois in an interior that really tells you how charged these conversations and these relationships were. I
have to say, your isolation, Gio, is sounding far more exciting than mine. But then that's perhaps because there are too many young.
I wish. I'm really moved always by that picture, and I had a one-to-one with it. I remember one night when the viewing closed in New York before the auction, and that's one of the privileges that, of course, we have, this unfettered relationship with the work of art. And I really tried to get under the skin of Misia. She is really a controversial figure because she was the muse, the flirting muse with all of them. So as we go back to the picture, the person behind her is another painter, Vallotton. And Vallotton also had a romantic relationship with Misia. So she was able to basically, enthuse them, entrance them, seduce them all. But at the same time, she stayed married to Thaddée, and Thaddée is actually the person of whom you see just a sliver of a profile, the pipe and the portly figure.
I mean, it's quite brutal from Vuillard, isn't it? I mean, I assume they were friends, but you see her husband has been almost cut out of the picture altogether, and then what's left is his paunch. I mean, it doesn't seem like the most flattering way to depict one of your good friends.
It's clearly the pun in the whole composition. He wants it's very subvertly aggressive, very very passive aggressive, I would say, which seemed to be one of the main sentiments and moods prevailing in those salons. So there is really this kind of undercurrent of Spannung, if you want to use like a German term to even say something even more charged in tension, very, very present, very pre-Freudian. We're not even in Freudian territory, really, I mean, but it's not yet digested psychoanalysis, but, you really feel all this kind of like incredibly charged interior. I actually found, sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, you're mentioning Freud and talking about the complexity of psychology that's in the painting, which is so manifestly there. But what doesn't then happen, which you might expect, is there isn't any sort of sly glance from Misha that seems to be acknowledging Vuillard's presence.
And then once again here, there is another fourth protagonist that you have to take time in deciphering, who's the dog.
It's a classic sort of artistic strategy, and it's almost as though that dog is a slightly tongue-in-cheek stand-in for Vuillard himself, pawing at the mistress.
Absolutely. The metaphor of Vuillard is definitely there. I think that's the alter ego, the dog. And again, it makes it even more intense.
Should we talk about Bonnard? Because he clearly paints lots of interiors, just like Vuillard, and we've been thinking about front rooms, and you mentioned the bathroom, you mentioned the balcony, but there's a crucial room that we all use and have to, of course, and that's the bathroom. And if there is one artist who is the great laureate of the bathroom, who's immortalised it, it's within modern art, at least, it's Pierre Bonnard, because he starts to paint his wife Marthe in the bath. Again and again and again. There's nothing realistic about this at all. And I've actually been and visited that property, and it's really not very big at all. It's extremely humble, extremely modest. The bathroom, which he had fitted in, it was one of the main modern interventions to the house he did. It was it's tiny, and it was very modern, and it was completely white. And then he creates this sequence of paintings of Marthe in the bath, which don't replicate that at all, but take us into this strange, very subjective, dreamlike, phantasmagorical world of the imagination. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about Marthe as a figure, because she's got a very bad press over the years, hasn't she?
Well, she was the Yoko Ono of the Nabis, wasn't she? In a sense, or at least she had that kind of presence. She's still having it. She created this bond with Bonnard that was absolutely unique and mesmerizing. She was really absolutely the muse, the person that changed completely the way that he painted at the end. This is a primal relationship.
He embarks on this great series of bathtub paintings of her, and they actually extend beyond her death. So he's still painting her in the bathtub, finishing paintings after she's died. And the curious thing about them is, of course, by the time he was painting them, she was actually she was quite advanced in age. She was in middle age, but he's always painting her. Her body never seems to age at all. And there's this curious thing where it almost looks like the bathtub could be some sort of sarcophagus, but there's some sense of, I don't know, something revelatory in terms of the strange, fantastical light effect, some sense of the atmosphere of an afterlife almost. And I think they are great testaments to his love, the love that he felt for her. I know, Gio, that I think you've got another one of these.
I've got to go. So it's been
This
really
has been
great.
fun though, it's been great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, and enjoy the time at home if you can. I am conscious that you have 3 little ones, so it's testing.
Yeah. I don't think they'll let me take a long bath, but you never know. Give it a try.
Ciao.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.